And the truth is that many who have lived through the pain of divorce and watched their kids struggle have plenty of things to be fearful about, right?
Absolutely.
The idea of remarrying can be both exciting and at the same time feel really daunting. Honey, when you and I met, you had already lived through 2 failed marriages, and your daughter Annika had been through a lot by then.
Yeah.
What might have been some of the fears that came up for you as our relationship became a bit more serious?
Ooh, well, I was afraid of failing again.
Welcome to the Blended Family Breakthrough Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike and Kim.
We believe in a world where blended families can experience a future full of hope, connection, and peace.
That's why we offer tools, strategies, and guidance that move you from a place of confusion and conflict to experiencing a life of confidence and connection.
We're so glad you're joining us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations as we cover everything from romance to parenting, and yes, even dealing with that difficult ex.
So if you're ready to experience breakthrough in your blended family, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Well, hey there. Thanks for choosing to spend a little bit of time with us today. We are very glad that you're here. And while you are here, could we ask you a favor? Would you give us a little feedback on Apple Podcasts or over on Spotify? Just hit the star rating that represents the value of this show to you. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, would you take a minute to leave a review and let us know how the show is benefiting you? We would really appreciate hearing from you.
That's right. It's such a privilege to have connected with hundreds of blended family couples, and we would love to hear from you too. You know, it's funny, when we get to interact with couples, we often hear a similar story. They share that they're deeply in love with each other, they feel like they found their person, and they dream of building a home together. But they've already started to notice the complexities and the confusion that seems to be setting in, and they're struggling to see how they could possibly resolve some of the challenges that they're already up against. Sometimes it's issues with the kids or with an ex-spouse. Maybe it's more logistical. But regardless of the dynamics and everything they're facing, underneath it all is a sense of ambiguity and so many unknowns that tend to rob them of the confidence and the clarity they need in order to pursue their dream of blending. That's when fear sets in. Sometimes they don't actually use the word fear. In fact, you might not use the word fear right now either. But when we get right down to the root of what's happening inside, fear is often what it is, and it can leave couples feeling stuck, hopeless, sometimes paralyzed.
Absolutely. And you know, over the years, we have listened to countless stories that include some of that fear. Couples share things with us like, you know, the way we each do life with our kids is just so different. I can't see how the day-to-day stuff will ever work and how we're ever going to get on the same page. Right?
Or something like this. You know, when we're all together, our kids start acting out, and then we blame each other and disagree about how each other's kids should behave.
That's right.
We hear that all the time.
Yeah. Another one we hear is, my partner's ex-spouse is controlling and unpredictable. And honestly, I feel unsafe because there aren't any boundaries in place with her.
Yeah. Or how about this? My ex tells our kids that I've left them behind because I've moved on. He doesn't approve of my new partner, and he's made threats to take me back to court to reduce my time with the kids.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Or how about this one? When we talk about the possibility of blending, things get intense between us, and we don't have the tools to fix things and get through those rocky times.
Yeah. And these are just a few of the kinds of things we've heard couples struggle with as they consider blending their families. So let's jump in and explore this tough emotion of fear, or whatever it is that you're calling it, that can sometimes paralyze couples and keep them from moving forward with blending.
Yeah. You know, the truth is that a certain amount of fear, or we would maybe call it apprehension, is actually good.
Right.
We encourage couples to openly acknowledge their concerns and confront that fear before they merge their families.
Absolutely.
Often it's the couples who avoid hard issues and push their fears aside that end up in the most difficult situations. Eventually, they feel blindsided by some very painful realities because they went into their blend wearing kind of these rose-colored glasses and believing it would all just work out somehow.
Yeah.
So fear is something that we want to acknowledge and have the courage to talk about together as a couple.
And I think it can get a bit tricky because there's a difference between someone who's expressing fear and valid concerns and at the same time has a willingness to do what's necessary to move beyond them.
Right.
Versus someone who's hung up on a lot of irrational or anticipatory fear, and they're unwilling to learn new skills in managing their emotion and problem solving with their partner.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. One mindset is forward focused on growth.
Right.
The other's held hostage by fear.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the truth is that many who have lived through the pain of divorce and watched their kids struggle have plenty of things to be fearful about, right?
Absolutely.
The idea of remarrying can be both exciting and at the same time feel really daunting. Honey, when you and I met, you had already lived through 2 failed marriages, and your daughter Annika had been through a lot by then.
Yeah.
What might have been some of the fears that came up for you as our relationship became a bit more serious?
Ooh, well, I was afraid of failing again, right? I mean, my marriage to Annika's dad and our divorce was so incredibly painful, and I never wanted to go through that kind of grief again.
Right.
Or put Annika in a position to have to experience more loss and grief. I was in this hyper protective mode around my heart and around hers.
Right. So how were you able to kind of move beyond those fears of failing again?
I had to separate my valid concerns from my irrational or my anticipatory fears.
Okay. So what did that look like? How'd you do that?
Well, I had valid concerns. One was my own discernment when it came to picking a good partner. In the past, I hadn't approached my romantic relationships from a place of wisdom. The guys that I previously chose to date and the 2 that I ultimately married were not healthy or good for me. I was a bit blinded by love. I sometimes say that not only did love make me blind, but made me deaf, dumb, and blind.
Okay.
And I didn't pay much attention to the red flags that were there.
So you felt like you had a broken picker.
Right.
Okay.
And so naturally, when I started to fall in love with you, I had some concerns about my own discernment.
I see that. So dive a little deeper into that. What were some of your concerns?
Well, was I being unwise again? Was I ignoring any red flags?
I see. Okay. So in the past, you didn't use wisdom in your choices and you kind of ignored some of those red flags. I hear that right?
Yes. Okay. And my choices proved to be disastrous and dysfunctional. And of course, I didn't want to make that kind of mistake again. I was duped in the past by my own romantic instincts. I thought they were the one, and we were so good together. But then I was blindsided and hurt, and I just did not want to make another disastrous choice, even though I really loved you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, certainly that's a valid concern. And I'm sure many people who've lived through divorces have similar thoughts.
Yeah.
If I thought that my past relationship was true love, but I turned out to be wrong about that, how do I know I'm right about this relationship?
Exactly.
Right? That's kind of the gist of it. So can you share a little bit about how you were able to work through that valid concern?
I was able to hold my concerns up against those anticipatory or those irrational fears that I had. Just because I made unwise choices in the past didn't mean that would always be the case. The reality is I had learned a lot about myself since my second divorce, about what I valued in a partner, around my priorities and the character traits I didn't want and what I did want. I was not the same person I was before. Through years of counseling and personal growth, I learned a lot about healthy boundaries, and I'd made a lot of positive changes in my own life. I was a healthier person at that point, and I understood what a healthy, functional relationship looked like. And I wasn't going to settle for dysfunction in any relationship ever again. So when we started to date, I was actively seeking to discover any red flags that might crop up. I was no longer blinded by love. I was wiser and more equipped to steer clear of unhealthy dynamics.
So your valid concerns began to dissipate as you became more aware of the relational patterns in your past that didn't serve you well. And then compared that to how you'd grown to be a bit more wiser, a bit more discerning. So you were more prepared to acknowledge any of those red flags instead of just ignoring them. And you were willing to walk away from any relationship that you knew wasn't going to be healthy or good for you, especially in the long run. Did I hear that right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
As I got to know you, honey, I could also compare your character to that of my previous partners. And eventually I realized how very different you were from them, which helped me to make decisions based on truth instead of being hijacked by fear and pain from the past.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe you're listening to Kim share some of her initial fears with blending, and maybe you can relate to her experience. You'd probably really like to have a good sense of clarity and confidence around blending, but maybe you've got some nagging concerns or fears that are causing you to question if blending is a good idea. Possibly some of those fears are different than the ones that Kim described, but nonetheless, they're there. Again, we really want you to pay attention to those, actively looking for the red flags so that you can actually face them and work through those fears. The truth is, blended family dynamics are tough for any healthy, functional couple to navigate. But when there's really deep issues or dysfunctional patterns, it's pretty wise to pump the brakes and do a little exploration. The statistics are clear. The divorce rate of second marriages is double that of first marriages. One reason is because of all the challenges that blended couples face. But another reason is due to couples rushing into the blended dynamic a bit too quickly without some discernment or real full understanding of what they're actually signing up for. When they haven't paid attention to any of those red flags, it's really tough.
In his book, Preparing to Blend, Ron Deal offers a list of what he calls yellow caution flags for couples to consider before they move forward. One that he shares is this. If either of you have an oppositional or behaviorally challenged child or a difficult former spouse with vastly different morals than you, it's important to stop and ask yourself if you're prepared to marry into these kind of challenges. You need to understand and accept that these dynamics will dramatically impact parenting and relationships within your home. Honestly consider if you're prepared to accept those realities. Are you willing to learn how to best approach them, as well as manage all the frustrations and the chaos that are sure to be part of your blend?
That's right. You know, another caution flag that Ron mentions is if either you or your partner have stepped too quickly into your relationship after experiencing a big loss. And generally speaking, a new romance doesn't facilitate deep healing and will most often delay the healthy process of working through the grief. So attempting to heal hurts with a new relationship is actually going to set the stage for some relational challenges down the road.
Also, if you've noticed character issues with your new partner, such as obsessive compulsive behaviors, a quick repeating temper, blaming others for their own life situations, an inability to respect healthy boundaries, excessive debt, deception, unhealthy enmeshment or disengagement with their family of origin, or a diagnosed personality disorder, don't ignore these things or think they'll magically resolve on their own. These were all character issues I was on the lookout for when we began dating, honey, as well as addictive behaviors and a misalignment around faith.
Yeah, I understand that. You know, another yellow flag would be if either of you have difficulty trusting the other. Often when past hurts of betrayal have occurred, they might leave a residue of distrust on someone's heart.
Yes, absolutely. I experienced betrayal in my past, and it definitely left me with trust issues to work through. And sometimes I was blindsided by what we call irrational influencers, which seem to get triggered when even the slightest thing reminded me of past experiences with my previous partners.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn more about how to get over the hurts and triggers from your past, you can go back and listen to episode 5, where I share how I confronted my irrational influencers and learned to trust again. And we'll put a link in the show notes for that if you're interested.
Yeah. And, that was really worthy work that you did around that, honey. And I'm grateful because one of my painful triggers that's rooted in my childhood is feeling untrusted. Right. So the reality is over time, we can work through some of these flags, but we need to pay attention as best we can on the front end.
Yeah.
One last yellow flag that I'd like to mention is when you have a sense that your partner would like to change a relationship you have with one or more of your children. You'll want to understand kind of what's behind their need with that and consider if your children are feeling threatened by your new partner as well. I'd also add a yellow flag if your partner is attempting to erase or replace your children's other bio parent. If you want to learn a little bit more about those dynamics, you might want to grab a copy of Ron's book, Preparing to Blend.
Yeah. Now, let's be clear. We're not suggesting that if you see some yellow flags, you just need to get out of the relationship.
Right.
In fact, we're going to share some red flags with you as well. But these caution flags are signals that a courageous dialogue needs to occur. It doesn't mean you're doomed and you just need to find an exit strategy.
Right.
And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But let's touch on some of the red flags that Ron identifies. One red flag is feeling pressured to marry, especially if your partner doesn't acknowledge the importance of learning about blended family dynamics and equipping yourselves to successfully blend. We've met with couples who thought, we're so in love and love is all we need. We don't need to educate ourselves. And it doesn't take long before they start experiencing trouble.
Right.
Issues with the kids and conflict in their relationship. They've made some easy wrong turns. The truth is, you'll need a whole lot more than love to successfully blend your family. It takes intentionality, the right mindset, and best practice strategies if you want to build a home where everyone experiences love and connection. I can say that with confidence because leading up to our wedding day, I was pretty naive about the challenges of blending, and I kind of believed that love would conquer all. And oh boy, was I wrong.
Yeah. Even with a healthier picker, we still have a lot of problems.
Yep, you want to learn and you want a partner who's willing to learn.
That's right.
What's another red flag, honey?
Well, another one is if either of you have a difficult former spouse who spreads contempt and bitterness throughout the family. Okay. Now we're talking about some pretty extreme bitterness and contempt. If there's anger and vindictive behavior that's aimed at your partner, there's a good chance that one day their wrath will also extend to you. This is a vulnerable and powerless place to be, and it's unrealistic to expect that you, your partner, or the courts are going to have the ability to control how an ex behaves.
Yeah, something to consider.
Yeah, another red flag can emerge when there are extreme differences in parenting. So we've been supporting blended family couples for over 20 years now, and we believe that becoming effective parenting partners is one of the biggest challenges blended couples face.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I really agree that this is a red flag to pay attention to. For instance, if it's a priority in your home to stock the pantry and the fridge with gluten-free, low-sugar, healthy food items, but your partner and their kids regularly dine at fast food restaurants, how's that going to impact the parenting decisions around nutrition and healthy eating habits once everyone is living under one roof? It's like the simplest little thing, but things like this and tons more are going to morph into some painful issues that can negatively impact everyone. But We also believe it's really possible for couples to build a healthy parenting partnership and get united around the values, the character traits, and the life skills that they want to instill in all the kids. We've lived it, and we've helped countless couples to do the same.
We've helped pre and post blended family couples to align around a parenting strategy that honors both of their perspectives and supports all the children. And if you'd like to learn more about our coaching program that equips you with practical step-by-step support in building your parenting partnership, just click the link in the show notes to schedule a free coaching call with us to learn more.
Yep.
We can help you navigate your differences in a way that creates partnership and stability in your home, which will increase clarity and confidence around blending.
Yeah. Now remember, like Kim said earlier, we aren't suggesting that you walk away from your relationship if you see any of these yellow or red flags. We're actually encouraging you to courageously consider them, and we're inviting you to communicate about your concerns and your fears with your partner up front. Many couples cautiously enter into these brave conversations, and guess what? They end up coming out on the other side with a great sense of confidence that they're actually moving forward with wisdom and intentionality. It often affirms that they're headed in the right direction. If, on the other hand, as Ron advises, your conversations raise a check in your spirit, you have to really pay attention to it. Many couples tend to dismiss these frantically waving yellow flags or even the red ones because it means their dream may not become a reality as easily or as quickly as they hoped. Don't be naive. Even if you jump in, it doesn't mean your dream is going to become a reality. You've got to give voice to your concerns and talk through them with a trusted advisor if you need to, who really understands blended dynamics. You'll be very thankful that you did, whether your dream comes to fruition with this particular individual or not.
Absolutely. And we believe that Ron's book, Preparing to Blend, is a must read for every nearly or newly blended couple because it includes some helpful conversation starters and some activities that you can do with your partner and with your kids. And we'll put a link in the show notes for that, as well as the episode we did with Ron sharing about the importance of preparing to blend.
That's right. Now, before we move on, let's quickly identify the positive character traits you want to be on the lookout for. What are some of the green flags, right? We talked about yellow and red. Let's talk about some green flags. That's more fun. Back in episode 105, we shared the powerful traits you need to successfully blend and stay united as a couple. Those were empathy, humility, courage, flexibility, patience, and a curiosity mindset. These are character traits that both partners will need to successfully prepare for and navigate through all the ups and downs of blending.
Absolutely. And we're not suggesting that both partners must possess high levels of all these traits. But it's critical that each of you are willing to continue learning and growing in these areas as individuals.
Yeah. If we had to just pick one, it's that curiosity mindset, that growth mindset.
I don't know. I think they're all so important.
Well, they are. They are. But if you're willing to grow, you're often willing to learn some of those other ones.
Yeah, the growth mindset. But if you notice your partner seems to really be lacking in one of these traits and they just aren't willing to grow, or maybe they won't acknowledge the importance of this trait, I would consider that a yellow flag for sure.
Sure.
But wave a big green flag if both of you are exhibiting these character traits to some degree, and if you're both open to continued growth. That's what's important. And we'll go ahead and put a link in the show notes for that episode if you want to understand why these traits are so important and how you can take steps of growth both individually and as a couple.
That's right. All right. So remember, we're talking about fear today, and we're suggesting that one of the ways to resolve fear is to actually acknowledge the yellow and the red flags that we see, and then enter into dialogue with your partner about how you might address those concerns or worries. So let's shift gears and explore another aspect of fear that's common for single parents that tends to revolve around their kids. We coached one mom who was really struggling with the logistics that her kids would be facing after she and her fiance were married. You see, they were all going to be moving into this new home, which was actually in another town, which meant the kids were going to have to switch school districts. Now, her daughter had been involved in an extracurricular activity that wasn't offered at the new school. And because of that, she believed that her daughter was going to be really upset and might even just flat out refuse to relocate. This mom feared the possibility that her child would ask to live with her dad so that she wouldn't have to move and would be able to stay plugged in with her current school and her current favorite activity. Fear of all the unknown circumstances that could possibly go wrong can really keep a parent stuck and struggling with mixed feelings about blending.
So she was feeling like she had to choose between her own happiness and her kids' happiness. And she had some valid concerns around all the changes that her kids would experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is that ambiguity is part of the journey for blended families. It's not possible to have everything figured out prior to blending. However, this couple was really doing their best to prepare ahead of time for any challenges that they might face as their family blended. They intentionally took some steps to learn about best practices, they adjusted their own expectations, and they engaged in some ongoing, meaningful conversations with each other and with their kids.
Yeah. This mom was able to face her fear of the unknown by walking through it. Eventually, she discovered that her daughter's perspective was starting to open up.
Right.
She became excited about having a fresh start in a new school and to broaden the scope of her activities to try something new. This mom also had experienced fear around her ex-spouse's attitude towards the move. He was making some threats and engaging in some covert conversations with the kids to try and poison the well. But she was able to face these fears as well, and she didn't allow her ex's negative attitude to keep her from moving forward with what she believed was a really good decision for her and her kids.
Yeah.
And some of that entailed coaching her kids through their emotions and creating a safe space for them to be heard and process their own fears.
Again, it's not a bad thing to explore your fears and concerns about what your kids might experience.
Right.
And the reality is kids can be emotionally impacted when couples aren't intentional in their blending approach. And some easy wrong turns that couples tend to unintentionally make are things like moving too fast or underestimating the impact of loss and not allowing their kids to process their grief. Holding on to unrealistic expectations that your blended family is just going to function like a first family, right? Especially around parental roles and family time and things like that. But couples who know what realistic expectations look like and how to implement effective strategies as they blend will end up with the capacity to safeguard their kids from experiencing emotional harm.
Yeah. Not that the kids won't struggle at times. That's normal and that should be expected. But it is possible to navigate through all the ups and downs of blending while doing your best to mindfully protect all the kids and help them.
Yeah. And sometimes we see parents go into overprotection mode. So we want to protect them, but not overprotect them.
Right.
You know, sometimes we get locked into this idea that our kids shouldn't experience any kind of discomfort at all, which is pretty unrealistic, especially in blended dynamics.
Oh, yeah.
And trying to resolve every struggle for a kid is kind of an unhealthy parenting approach anyway. In fact, that's what the research shows. Kids need to learn how to face and overcome their discomfort. That's something that builds their resilience over time, and it prepares them for success as they move into adulthood. All parents have got to learn to come alongside and help their kids to learn these kinds of skills and at the same time steer clear of those easy wrong turns that can bring unnecessary challenges for their kids and, of course, for the entire blended family.
Right. Now, often kids in single parent homes, they're given a lot of power and control. They carry a lot of weight in the home around routines and decisions. And when that child chooses to kind of dig their heels in and refuses to blend, ooh, it can cause a tremendous amount of fear and guilt for a parent,
Right.
which can lead couples to getting stuck.
Mm.
If you have one or more stubborn kids who are resistant to blending, you might want to check out episodes 92 and 93 for some helpful strategies on how to manage these sensitive situations and move beyond your own fears while helping your children.
Yeah, I love how Ron Deal puts it. He says, children shouldn't get to dictate if and when you marry, but unwise is the couple who ignores the pushback or distress evident in a child. Moving forward, despite that, is equivalent to shooting yourself in the foot. Instead, slow down, talk through what you're seeing and what it's telling you about the child. Consult with your mentor, therapist, or coach, and together decide how you're going to move forward.
Wow, that is great advice. It's another yellow flag couples should pay attention to, and we're here to help if you'd like to reach out for some support.
Absolutely. Conquering fear isn't easy, and that's okay. We want to pay attention to our fears and at the same time work through them in ways that can build clarity and confidence. One thing we don't want to do is to make decisions based on fear.
Right.
And when we think back with hindsight to some of the worst decisions that we've ever made over the years, it's clear that many of them are made from a place of fear,
Yeah.
right? So we encourage you to mindfully examine and process through your fear before making any actual decisions. And it's our hope that you've discovered something today to help you to do that.
Right, exactly. Now, for most of us, myself included, the emotion of fear has a steady companion that tends to complicate things, and that's guilt.
Yeah.
For many blended couples, fear and guilt go hand in hand, stirring up a painful mix of confusing and conflicting emotions that tend to render us paralyzed, unable to move forward with blending. And of course, ongoing guilt was something I experienced for years, and it definitely had an impact on our blend.
Yeah.
In next week's episode, we'll be focusing on guilt and how to break free from unhealthy aspects of this strong emotion that, just like fear, can crush our confidence, obscure clarity, and negatively hijack our perspectives around blending.
That's right. You do not want to miss that episode. But for now, we're going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.